The House Oversight Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, please take attendance.
Chair Johnson?
Here.
Representatives Outman?
Here.
Whitecup? Here. Riley?
Here.
O'Malley?
Here.
Wozniak?
Here.
Berksey? Here. LeGrand?
Yes.
Young? Here. Mr. Chair, you do have a quorum.
All right, Representative O'Malley moves to adopt the minutes from the March 18, 2021 committee meeting. Without objection, the minutes are approved. All right, obviously we've dealt with this whole Director Gordon thing, the hush fund agreement. We've had a lot of talks about this. We moved the resolution for granting this committee subpoena power, and now we are to the point where I would like to move forward with issuing a subpoena. Before we go ahead and do that motion, I'd like to open up for discussion. If anyone would like to make some comments before that, now is the time. Does anyone have any comments?
I'll make a quick comment, Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead. Representative Outman.
Well, briefly, I just want to say I think lack of transparency has been a huge issue for Michigan government, particularly with this administration. And we have a duty within our oversight function of the legislator to look into some of these transparency issues and to hold folks accountable and to get some answers. And I think we owe it to the residents of our district and the state of Michigan to do so. And I look forward to doing that here today. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments. And I don't see any other comments out there. So with that, I will recognize Vice Chair Outman for the purpose of a motion.
I move that the House Oversight Committee vote to authorize the chair to issue and serve a subpoena on Robert Gordon to compel his testimony in this committee regarding his January 2021 separation from the Department of Health and Human Services and severance and confidentiality agreement entered into with the state following his departure.
Representative Outman makes a motion on the authorization of issuing and serving a subpoena. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Representatives Outman?
Yes.
Whitecup? Yes. Riley?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wozniak?
Yes.
Berksey? No. LeGrand?
No.
Young? No. Mr. Chair, you have 6 yeas, 3 nays, and no pass. With that, the motion carries.
All right, thank you. And we are going to take a quick break. I'm going to sign this subpoena, get it notarized, and then we'll come back here. So with that, the committee will stand at ease. Call the chair. The House Committee will come back to order. All right, now moving forward with legislation, we took testimony on House Bill 4591, which would actually forbid these confidentiality agreements from occurring in the future. This doesn't just apply to the executive branch, but the legislative branch as well. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's what this legislation does. We do have an H3 substitute on this that actually we've worked with the governor's office on, with the governor's attorney, trying to find an area where everyone can agree to make sure these things shouldn't occur and how can we stop it in a productive manner. So, with that, I will entertain a motion to adopt the H3 substitute to House Bill 4591. Representative O'Malley so moves. Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
On the motion to adopt the H3, Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Representatives Outman?
Yes.
Whitecup?
Yes.
Riley?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wozniak?
Yes.
Berksey?
Yes.
LeGrand?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, no nays, no pass. With that, the H3 substitute is adopted.
Thank you. All right, now I'll entertain a motion to report with recommendation House Bill 4591 as substituted with H3. And Representative O'Malley so moves. Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Representatives Outman?
Yes.
Whitecup?
Yes.
Riley?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wozniak?
Yes.
Berksey?
Yes.
LeGrand?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, no nays, no pass. With that, the bill is reported with recommendation of substitute.
Thank you. House Bill 4591 is reported on a unanimous vote. I think that's very good. Republicans and Democrats can agree we should not have these confidential agreements going forward. Glad to see some good work coming out of this committee here. All right, so we are done with the legislative side of things. We're now going to move into some of the DHHS orders specifically relating to school sports and the testing thereof. We have some people that would like to share their stories. And so with that, we're going to get kicked off with Sherry and Grace Lindsley. If they could come up to the microphone, press the red button, So get that mic turned on. Introduce yourself and just share your story for the committee. We are very grateful that you are here, and we're excited to hear what you have to tell us.
Can I pull this down? Okay, sorry. My name is Sherry Lindsley. I'm grateful to be here, but I'm also ticked off that I'm here to talk about what I'm talking about today. I wrote this down because I knew I was going to be so upset when talking about it. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm humbled to be able to share our story and hopeful that change can occur because of it. My daughter Grace is a 15-year-old freshman who attends Quincy High School. She is a 3-sport athlete who runs cross country, plays basketball, and plays soccer. Mid-January of this basketball season, Grace began to have trouble breathing while wearing her mask during practices and games. It gradually progressed to the point where she would have to ask to be pulled from the game to be able to catch her breath. Swallowing and physical activity became more difficult for her in the following weeks. After a visit with her pediatrician, we were sent to Mott Children's Hospital to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. There it was found that she had a cyst growing in her throat. As it was getting larger, it was causing her difficulty breathing and causing additional swallowing issues. She pushed with all she had to make it through basketball season, so she didn't let her team down, a team already struggling due to contact tracing practices. She wore a mask as mandated, which put more strain on her already struggling body. Surgery was scheduled April 13th to remove the cyst. It was successful, and she is now recovering and ready to get back to soccer. However, now we have another hurdle to overcome. The mandatory antigen testing that she will be required to have on a regular basis containing ethylene oxide will be introducing a foreign and potentially cancer-causing agent into her nasal cavity, getting direct access to her freshly healing throat. You can see her scar from last week. I, as a parent, have had my rights removed as far as what is best for my child's medical well-being. The MDHHS is forcing me to make the decision to go against her doctor's orders and introduce these agents to her nasal cavity, giving access to her throat that was just operated on, or her playing a sport that she has always loved to play. They have decided that a virus that a child could potentially get and have zero side effects from or symptoms from takes precedence over an illness a child already has. And there's nothing that us parents can do to stop it. The MDHHS has went as far as contacting Child Protective Services and families in other counties who are not abiding by their orders. While my daughter is recovering and I'm comforted in knowing her physical health is moving in the right direction, I'm worried about the mental toll that this has and will continue to take. She should not always be worried that this cyst may come back or that something else such as cancer could appear if she chooses to play soccer and continue with the mandated testing. We have to at some point start worrying and considering the whole well-being of our children as we continue to navigate this virus. I'm begging those in this meeting today to push and do whatever you can to bring the mandatory testing to an end. We at some point have to figure out how we're going to live with this virus, or we're all going to stop living altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to make some clarifications here. So your doctor actually recommended against this, and yet the orders are still...
He hasn't recommended against testing altogether. He has said she should not have anything foreign introduced into her nasal cavity. Okay.
And yet there's been no waiver process that they're allowing you a way around
There's
this?
nothing. I contacted my school district. They have said that the health department is very clear. There are no exceptions.
You'd think in a situation like this where someone had surgery like that there would be something of a waiver, something to find a way around this. I mean, there are always certain circumstances, so it seems like it's a one-size-fits-all policy here. Anyone else have any comments? Representative Riley.
Yeah, what type of test is this that you're required to take? Is it a PCR test or is it an antigen test?
The antigen test initially.
And is there any requirements that go along with when you take these? Like, is there restrictions on what you eat beforehand or drink or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for being here and for sharing your story. I was a cross-country runner myself. Breathing's pretty important to that. So hopefully that gets healed and we can get you back into athletics. It's an important part of your life. Thank you. Up next, we have Andy and Tyler Jansen. Are they here? Yes. Feel free to introduce yourself and tell your story.
I'm Andy Jansen, and this is my son Tyler. Tyler was contact traced through a fellow classmate. He's a senior at Coopersville High School, and he has an 11-year wrestling career, which was ended short by a contact trace. And he also tested negative. He had a 10-day quarantine. He was 24 hours short of competing, and he tested negative 9 times and was still not allowed to compete. He was ranked number 2 in the state, was undefeated. You know, scholarship implications and everything else that goes along with it. We're just, you know, there's got to be exceptions to this. Why are these healthy kids being tested and contact traced? And there's no proof to the contact. We asked the school to prove where the contact was. They could not. And we're still not allowed to compete. The health department turned us down, and that's where we're at. Tyler can add to this.
So my biggest thing is not necessarily I've accepted that I will be done high school wrestling and there's really nothing that can be done about that. My biggest concern is for other student athletes that are going to be in high school or even youth athletics that have to deal with such rigorous implications to testing, and there's so many different hoops that need to be jumped through, and even when you follow direct instruction to a T, there is really, it's a 50% chance that you may be taken out on something that you have no way around, and there's not even any direct correlation between you having anything that could harm any other students or not. There's no proof that it's there, and there's no way that you can show your side of the story to anything. It's a very one-size-fits-all policy. For me, testing as many times as I did, I feel that there should have been other things that were a factor in me being contact traced. And also, it should be more open to where they're getting their information from, because there's no proof that I was in contact with any student. I just think there's very much inconsistency of how they're contact tracing. And also, another point that I would like to bring up is the inconsistency between counties and the inconsistency between even schools, because there was multiple cases in different counties, and even in our county, that age was a big factor in, because there's a college that's within 10 miles of us that was, their restrictions are very much different than ours, and theirs is 7 days instead of 10 days or a negative test. So that's what is really frustrating to me and everyone around me, that our county is different, and just the inconsistency of what is going on is really frustrating to all of us.
Thank you. And I just want to, let's run through this here. So you were contact traced. Does that mean the school, there's someone at the school that tested positive and they determined that you were in the same classroom, or how did that all work? What was the start of all this?
Yes, that brings up a point to me as well, is we don't know how we're getting contact trace. There's no consistency of what a contact trace consists of. According to the CDC, it is 15 minutes within 6 feet. That is classified as a close contact. But it also says that is without a mask on, and we were required to have a mask on at all times inside of the school building. So the inconsistency of them on their contact tracing is very
So
frustrating.
who informed you? Was it the school? Was it the health
Yes.
department? So
Yes,
the
it
school
was.
informed you.
Mhm.
They couldn't tell you when or where it occurred, who it was. They just say you were in close proximity, now you must quarantine.
Yes, and there was no legal binding document. It was just basically a recommendation that they made sound like it had legal binding power that did not.
So they tell you that you got to quarantine for 10 days. In that time, you didn't show any symptoms,
No,
and you tested, you said 9 times you tested,
9 times
and
in 10
everyone was
days.
negative.
Six rapid tests, 3 PCR tests.
All right, so you had different types of tests.
Yes.
And your quarantine was over 24 hours after the important wrestling meet.
Yes, it was.
Correct.
And so because even though you don't even know what the circumstances were that you were potentially exposed, 9 types of negative tests, with 2 different types, but 9 ones that were negative, within 24 hours of it occurring, no symptoms, and you said you were ranked the number 2, which, number 1's better. Do you think you would have beat the number 1 person had you gone to state?
I mean,
Just say
you
yes.
never know that.
Of course, you
but
say
it's one of those things where I feel like I was in a very good spot to.
But you didn't get the opportunity,
No, that's
even
what's
though I
very
think all common sense would dictate you should have been given that opportunity.
And the other common sense is I am the assistant wrestling coach at Coopersville High School, and I was expected to conduct practice living in the same house with him, practicing with him in a wrestling room in our house. They knew all this, and that held no water. I don't understand the
Doesn't add up.
inconsistencies.
Representative O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of following up on the chair's conversation there. Again, you're a senior,
Yes, sir.
having had some experience in high school sports. The pinnacle is a state championship.
Yes, sir.
And you, as the chair said, you were ranked number 2 going into the state final.
Yes, sir.
And you were, again, I know I'm kind of reiterating, but I'm trying to lay something here, 24 hours away from a state championship bout.
No, 24 hours before our first qualifying meet. So we have
okay.
districts,
I gotcha.
regionals, and state.
Understood. Okay. Still, what are do you know, and I don't know if the MHSAA could weigh in on this, what were their rules? I would assume you would have been tested the day of the meet too, right?
We were told by Mark Ewell that, and I have the letter, that said they were going to follow what the health department said
Gotcha.
to a T.
It was up to our county health department, and they did not allow me to wrestle. Therefore, he was just following what he had to follow.
Yeah, seems a little inflexible. Thank you.
Representative Outman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative O'Malley actually stole my thunder, so I guess I'll just say that I'm so sorry that your season was cut short. As a wrestler myself, a former wrestler, I know how much you guys sacrifice, and like Chairman Johnson said, you were in a really good position to go out and win a state championship, and that was kind of stripped away from you for no good reason, in my opinion. Has your scholarship or any sort of implications regarding your further wrestling career been affected by that? And I'm sure it has been.
Yes, in various ways. There was multiple schools that, because wrestling, the way recruiting works for college wrestling is you have to go based off of your senior year and your performances, because wrestling's different than any other sport. You have to look at what weight you are at and what they need to fill as a college. So really, they're going to recruit you as a senior and your performances as a senior, and I had no chance to showcase that.
Sure. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Again, my deepest apologies, and I wish you the best going forward.
Thank you very much, sir.
So do you think, and I feel free if you don't want to answer this, but do you believe that you will wrestle in college next year, or what's your thoughts at this point? I mean, you were ranked second in the state. That to me would lead someone to believe you're probably going to wrestle at the higher level. What's it look like?
I do have intentions to further my education and wrestling career.
Okay. Representative LeGrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's not a great format for me to ask you questions or get to some points here, but I at least want to point out, and thank you for coming, and I think you've raised some really important points. I think it's worth acknowledging that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the rules are constantly shifting based on what we know. I mean, we all remember a year and a half ago when we were wiping down our groceries frantically. And we thought that, touching things was going to be the big way that we just didn't know, right? I don't wipe down my groceries anymore. So we've got to respond to information, and anytime you've got a moving target, there are going to be rules, and they should be re-examined, I think, based on what we know more, what we know and what we know better. But I mean, I think I want to make sure that I think there's important conversations about how to get this better, but that can be separated, at least for me, from a question of, is this a giant conspiracy and we shouldn't do this and it's all oppression and lack of liberty? I mean, the reality is we got millions of people around the world dying of this. Members of this chamber have died of this. We got a lot of people really at risk. I've got a 79-year-old immunocompromised mother who lives with me. I didn't want to be the thing that killed my mother by bringing it home. Like, you're way lower risk of dying than I am. I'm way lower risk than my mother. But it's not just 54-year-olds I'm worried about. It's the people they might come in contact with. So we have to have I think we have to have a societal response to this. And one of the things that's annoying about this disease, I wish it wasn't true, but this disease has got the really nasty feature that you can be giving it to other people before you're even symptomatic. And there are reasons to do contact tracing, because if we don't do contact tracing, and it's a sloppy, you've got to prove it, you've got to have it's a cautionary thing, right? We don't think that everybody who has contact gets it. We just don't know. And so there are CDC protocols for how long we have to wait before we're sure. Now, I am 100% with you, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Tyler? I am like 100% with you that there should be a complete re-examination of what we mean by contact, right? And we've already seen some movement on that schools are now saying, it's not 6 feet, 3 feet's probably enough. So the CDC shifted on that, just kind of like we don't wipe down our groceries. And I think that being within, you and me being within 3 feet of each other inside a building for more than 15 minutes is completely different than if we're both wearing masks standing on a baseball field, right? I mean, I think the odds of us catching it outside, as far as I can see from the science, are pretty close to non-existent. So I think people walking down the street wearing masks are just being polite, but I don't think it's an important part of stopping the disease. So I am 100% with you that we should be re-examining, and maybe in a current fast-changing world, we would have not even ruled you as having had contact, right? Because if we had a different criteria for masks or for not masks, or for inside and outside, that's a really important thing. So I am sorry that you are, caught in an evolving and maybe stale rule. I just want to point out, if we're going to try to save lives, we do have to have rules, and we do have to try to stick with them, and we have to make an attempt to have them be informed by science as best we can. And the reality, then again, I wish wasn't true. I wish we didn't have these new variants, which turn out to be, maybe 50% is contagious and 50% is more serious. That means that all of our old rules and habits from a year ago don't necessarily work for this variant. So we're in an evolving situation, and I hate to say, we're always going to have examples of the person for whom this really stunk, and it really stunk for you, and I'm sorry. But I do think it's good, healthy for us to have a conversation about what rules should we apply now, given what we know now. And I guess I'd say, I'm sorry we can't make the rules move faster than they do. And I think testimony like yours will help us have, examine those questions of like, how do we make these rules better? And I think, frankly, a vaccine, like if you had the vaccine, then we'd be having an even better discussion. Like, okay, you're fully vaccinated, like why are we restricting your movements, right? So I think we're about to have a conversation about what does vaccinated mean. And unfortunately, in your age group, you probably haven't got it yet. But if your dad's totally vaccinated, like, he's, that's a lot of protection. And so I think that once vaccines really get out in the community, I hope we're almost at the end of this, which is cold comfort to you because you're at the end of your academic season and you lost a real thing and a really important thing that you've been working on for a long time. So you totally have my sympathy and my empathy, but I just want to make sure that we're remembering what we're trying to do, and we're not trying to be malicious. This is not a grand conspiracy to screw up wrestling in the state of Michigan. This is an attempt to save lives and keep a disease under control that's really, really hard to control and does kill people.
No, and thank you for your comments, Rep. LeGrand. I'm going to provide a counter alternative here, too. Alternatives matter, right? So we can look at the virus and say, hey, we want to stop the virus, we want to prevent deaths. Everyone wants to do that. But you have to understand, when you do that, the actions that you do also have side effects. And so you have to decide, all right, what is the alternative, and is it worth it or not? When you have this idea where if you get contact traced and all of a sudden your season is over, what we had happen, local school in my district, the entire football team told each other, and that school offered a virtual or an in-person option, and everyone at the school agreed the in-person was probably better instruction, but everyone on the football team said, you're going to do virtual, because if you go in person and someone in that classroom tests positive, now the whole team is done for the year. So because of these mandates out there, a whole team decided not to go in-person instruction, even though a lot of them actually admitted it would be a better education, but they didn't want to put the team's jeopardy or the team's future in jeopardy. And there's a lot of social pressure on that team. And I don't blame them for making that decision. And so that's the alternative you got to consider, is now you're going to have that where maybe education isn't being taken as seriously as it should. Also, one of the issues I see in America, I think you got a lot of lazy, fat people. And I'm just going to say it. That's where we've gone as a society. And I don't think if you have policies that are actually almost discouraging young people from being active, where we're actually making it harder for people to be active, to do sports, are we not going to further go down this line of an unhealthy population? If you want to beat the virus, you want to be healthy. We want to encourage people to be out there eating more, not eating more, to be exercising more and eating healthier. And I haven't seen that in any of these discussions. And I think if you really want to talk about beating the virus, it's not, you don't hide from the virus. You actually get your body in a position where you can fight it better. And what this has happened to a lot of these student athletes is the exact opposite effect. We've locked them in their home and said, don't go out, don't be active. But you want to counter, so go ahead.
I don't even want to counter. I just want to make a point here, and that is, this is exactly how the legislature should work. Like, a respectful acknowledgement of a tension, and then trying to figure out where we land on that tension is what we should be doing. There is a real tension, and politicians don't do a very good job of it. One side says, oh my gosh, you're killing the economy, and the other side says, oh my gosh, everyone's dying. The fact of the matter is, since this virus hit, the world, there's been a tension between, I don't want to live in mud huts and go back to a barter system, right? We've got to figure out how to keep the economy going during a pandemic, and that is a real priority. On the other hand, I don't want my mother dying, and that is a real priority. And we've had that tension since the beginning. And there's a difference, there's a huge difference between throwing stones at the other side and reducing the other side's position and minimizing the complexity, and talking about acknowledging the complexity and discussing it respectfully and moving forward. And that's why I love you, Representative Johnson. Like, we may disagree on where we land on this, but we're not going to disagree about the macro concerns, and we're not going to disagree about the fact that this is a real tension. And so if we are all with our best efforts trying to figure out where we put the pin today, then we're doing democracy the way it ought to work, and we're being the body we should be. If we're trying to score points off each other, then America falls apart. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to have this discussion where I'm not catching a whiff of you disrespecting or minimizing my concerns, and it'll be a cold day in Hades before I try to minimize or disrespect your concerns for this. So I really appreciate it, and so I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying, there are tensions, and you may land in a different place than I may land, but this is how democracy works, right? If we had a dictator, then we could have a dictator who could tell us this is where it lands. And I don't particularly like dictatorships. I like democracy. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Representative Riley.
Wow, you teed this one off over here. So, because, yeah, we talked about many things. You talked about what other areas are doing across the country or the world. You talked about liberty. And that's really, I guess one point I wanted to make right here is, when you come to, and we got young people here, that's why I'm saying this, is that if you think that the legislature is all in agreement here, you're totally wrong. There's much of on this issue, it's about liberty. This is solely what it's about. And we feel that our liberties are being infringed by the policies of the government. From what you're saying right now, you mentioned inconsistent policies going forward, or that you've dealt with, and that's what we see all the time. And to Representative LeGrand's point about looking at data, are we ignoring data from other parts of the world, other parts of the country? There's places that are using ivermectin to treat this. We don't even hear about it in our world here today in the United States. We even try to not let people take it. So from your viewpoint, Tyler, as somebody who's going to be voting, or I don't know if you presently vote, how do you look at your government that's sending you all these messages that appear to me to be taking away your liberty based on data that they want to select?
I see a lot of things that definitely worry me for future student athletes going forward, and that's the main reason why I'm here today, is to change things for the up-and-coming, say, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, even 8th grade, kids that are going to have to deal with stuff around what we're dealing with right now and going forward, and it just worries me, and I see a lot of hardship in the next year trying to overcome these things, and it definitely brings to light why I'm here, and going forward I would definitely see that we need to be more educated, but we need to educate off of strictly where we need to base what we are trying to move forward with off of data that is relevant to where we are forming these laws to where the laws need to be in place.
Great, thank you. And just lastly, so do you think that the government cares more about you than your parents do? And who do you think should be making these decisions? Should it be more in the lines of the people that are closer to the situation, or do you think it should be the government?
I personally think that if you are not endangering anyone, and per se, what I think would be fair and just would be that if
The representative's asking you who cares more about you, your government or your parents?
Oh, I would definitely think that parental is definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're closer to the situation. Thank you for coming in and expressing your views. I know it's not easy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Young.
Well, good morning, Tyler. Thank you so much for being here, you and your dad. We appreciate you guys. This is how I believe, just like my colleagues say, this is how we get better. This is really how we get better. This pandemic, nobody had any type of game plan. We didn't know what to do. And so we've been making missteps along the way. That I can honestly admit that everything hasn't been perfect. And so your testimony gives me ideas on how to make things better. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because it came up before when we had testimony, it might even been our first committee meeting, I'm not certain, Mr. Chair, when we had the Let Them Play, young people were here, and they are concerned about their scholarships. And so for me, when you have athletes like yourself, like the #2 in the state, there shouldn't be any question regarding scholarship opportunities, and particularly as it relates to state institutions. And so what I'm saying is I want to look at that, because these institutions should not be able to deny you after 11 years. Was it 11 years you said? I thought I heard 11, right. 11 years of being in the sport, and now because of something that none of us could control, you have a chance to miss out. So we don't want that to happen. So I just want you to know that I'll write you a letter of recommendation.
Thank you.
Because we need for people to know that we're not going to sit back while we're still dealing with this pandemic. We're here to support you. And there are different ways to do it. I don't like skinning cats. I like feeding birds with 2 hands instead of killing the bird. I'm that person. I'm always the glass half full person. So I want to see how we can ensure that you're not missing on anything that you've earned over these past 11 years. Okay, Tyler?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Rep. Young. Got another, the first person that came up, I think the committee must have been asleep, because now they're like asking you all kinds of questions. I kind of feel bad for you. We got next is Rep. Hoytinga.
Actually, Rep. Riley took my question, and I did want to ask this of the young lady that came up, and thank you. My son's name is Tyler, so I just wanted to ask you, does your father have your best interest at heart? Do you trust your father, or do you trust me more?
Most definitely my father.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your testimony and for sharing your story this morning, for coming out here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
All right, next up, the Whitaker family. I said Lindsay, John, and Aaron. I'm not sure if all 3 of you are coming up or 1, 2 of you, but feel free, come on up here and introduce yourself and share the committee your story. And I am very grateful for everyone that comes. It's easy for us. We get paid to be here. These people are taking a day, off of their work, away from school. I mean, this is a sacrifice for them to come here. You probably have to pay to park. So really, we do thank you guys for coming here this morning.
Our daughter, Erin.
Is your mic on? Press the red button. Thank you.
There you go. All right. I'm Lindsay. This is Aaron and my husband, John. So I'm just going to read what we composed. All right. We are here today as the parents of 5 student athletes who are involved in athletics at all levels, from elementary all the way to the collegiate level. We would like you to hear their stories in hopes that it may help all students and parents within this state. We have seen firsthand the impact that the governor's and MDHHS's restrictions have had on each of our children in different ways. From total cancellation of seasons, to being forced out of school and out of their sport to quarantine, to most recently being forced to choose between being on a team or using a test that could cause a potentially severe allergic reaction. We have with us our 12-year-old daughter, Erin, who as of yesterday is no longer allowed to participate on her middle school track team. Erin has a history of severe and multiple health issues, including severe reactions to a wide assortment of chemicals, including several of those used to disinfect, clean, and sanitize, and that are promoted through the local health department as being safe. Her face and immune response say otherwise. The last time she came in contact was at the doctor's office with the chemicals used to disinfect equipment that touched her face. This is our reluctance and why we don't want to stick a swab up her nose, and her doctor is fully in agreement with that. So we were relieved to see that the COVID testing would not be an issue for her this year due to her age and the guidelines given by the MDHHS, which specifically states Student athletes 13 and up are to be tested. Unfortunately, our school district announced that they would be testing all athletes at the discretion of the local health department. We then consulted with Aaron's doctor, who expressed concerns regarding the ethylene oxide that's used to sanitize the swabs that are placed into the student's nasal cavity. His concern was a potential reaction similar to the reactions that she has had in the past. Her doctor's solution to swabbing was for her to get an alternative test done that does not include the ethylene oxide being placed in her nostril. We were unsuccessful in finding anywhere to take her that was even remotely close to have her tested. We would have had to pay out of pocket for this test. So we appealed to our school and to the local health department looking for help in obtaining the test. They claimed there was none and that we were just out of luck. In light of this, we reached out to the school looking to get her exempted from testing due to her age and her medical history. The school, along with the local health department, refused to allow for these exemptions and instead is now choosing to not allow her to participate in her sport unless we are willing to submit her to testing using a test that would in fact contain the ethylene oxide. They are blatantly discriminating against her for a documented medical issue. We also have 2 high school athletes who were coerced into testing in order to participate in their spring sports. Parents and students are being bullied into testing their healthy athletes with tests that explicitly specify they are to be used for symptomatic people. If parents refuse to allow their children to be tested, their student athletes are being excluded from sports and singled out by coaches, teachers, and students alike. They are therefore being denied their right to a full and well-rounded education unless parents consent to the unethical testing of their child, agreeing to have their child's information shared with whomever the school or health department deems appropriate. These tests are causing our student athletes stress and anxiety, fearful that they may fail their COVID test despite being symptom-free and healthy. This is leading to seemingly endless quarantines of varying lengths of time, depending on which health department's guidelines one chooses to go by, and in some cases, that even varies by different staff members within the same health department. These quarantines are leading the student athletes to be isolated, denied valuable classroom education time, because we all know learning virtually doesn't compare to actually being in the classroom with an instructor and classmates. They're missing out on their sports of choice, which is what often keeps kids motivated and in some cases out of trouble. These quarantines are leading to anger, animosity, and fear of fellow classmates. Every day our kids go to school afraid they will be sent home again to quarantine despite being healthy. They are feeling targeted and discriminated against within the school setting. Many of you may be wondering why athletics are so important. Why don't we just pull our kids and wipe our hands clean of the entire mess? The why is fairly simple. The life skills, the motivation, and the learning that take place on a court or field are invaluable. From our family's perspective, our oldest daughter's involvement in basketball and athletics in high school is what has allowed her to go to college on scholarship to play ball, has kept her motivated to keep those grades up so that she can remain eligible, and she's developed a work ethic within her that may not otherwise have been there. Athletics teach our young people skills that will translate into life down the road, such as working with others that you may not like, or keeping that positive attitude when times get difficult. God has wired us to thrive on human interaction and community, and athletics provide a place for our students to do both of those things. It also gives our students ways to burn off that extra energy that can prohibit them from being successful within the classroom. Our kids are all hungry for that interaction and outlet, as demonstrated when a local church would open their doors for their gym use and allow the older kids to play pickup basketball. The kids would play for hours until someone made them all go home, and then they would be banging on the door the next day asking to do it again. Our freshman daughter is 15. She was devastated when her time came to quarantine due to contact tracing. Her season had already been cut short, and as a starter on the varsity basketball team, she felt like she was letting her team down. Just the day prior to being quarantined, she came home telling us that she had started sitting by herself in classes and at lunch in hopes of avoiding having to come in contact with anyone who came down with COVID. Why do our students have to isolate themselves out of fear within a school setting? Why are our students being forced to mask up all day long in school, as well as on their athletic courts or fields, and then being told that masks are ineffective even when both parties are wearing one, and therefore they must still quarantine? What's the point of wearing the masks if the kids are going to have to quarantine regardless? We live about 10 minutes away from the Indiana border, where we can go across the border and we can go watch any sporting event we want without having to mask or test. We are the only state with these restrictions, as strict as they are, and yet we still have the highest COVID rate. Obviously, the restrictions aren't working, and it appears to parents and student athletes alike that MDHHS and Governor Whitmer are looking for scapegoats for the ineffective leadership. Our students should not have to be subjected to the asinine regulations that are not ethical, legally questionable, and totally ineffective. Our students are not the guinea pigs for the state of Michigan and do not deserve to be punished in the manner that they have been. Let's remember that when MDHHS enacted these policies, student athletes accounted for approximately 0.6% of all COVID-positive cases for January, February, and March, the 3 months leading up to the new restrictions. When does the overreach stop, and at what point do we as parents, students, and residents of Michigan say enough is enough? It's our job as parents to advocate for our children, to make decisions for our children, and to raise our children. This is not the job of the unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats in Lansing who don't know our children and certainly don't have their best interests at heart.
Thank you for your comment. So what sport do you play? Do you mind me asking?
Basketball and track.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
volleyball.
And volleyball.
I know for myself, you know, I'm not the greatest athlete out there, but I was a runner myself, cross country and track, and that was one of the most important things for me in high school because it made me actually want to go to school because I knew at the end of the day I got to go to practice with my teammates. You take that away, it doesn't just affect, you know, the athletic side, it affects the academic side. And I think you're right. God created us to be social. He created us to interact with each other. We can't go years on end of just trying to isolate over and over. And you're right, what is the point of requiring them to wear masks if someone gets it and you say, well, now you got to go quarantine anyways? What was the point of that all along? Representative Riley.
Thank you. Did you say you have 5 children?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I see. That's one thing I've noticed is that the people that have lots of children look at this whole thing a lot differently because they have the realization of having a large family takes responsibility. They say, I don't got time for all this nonsense. That's just a comment. But you mentioned unethical a couple times in your testimony. What are you referring to as unethical here? Could you elaborate on that?
It is our position that it is unethical to be forcing these student athletes to be testing when the test specifically says it is for people with symptoms. It is not to be used as a diagnostic tool, and we are forcing our students and our parents to make a decision. You either test and you can play, or you don't test and you're just out of luck, sorry.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To my colleague's point in the earlier testimony, we are in a pandemic, and our public health people are trying to keep our public healthy. So I do understand that. So I guess let me ask you this. Do you believe or feel that there should be public health rules?
Absolutely. But at the point that they begin infringing on our constituents' rights, there's a problem.
So, and I guess that would be...
We lose control and power over decision-making for our own children, that's a problem.
And I guess that's my other point. There should be, I think everybody agrees, pandemic, there should be some rules. but you should have the choice, the right, to modify to take care of your family.
Correct.
I think our other concern is currently in our state, these rules aren't even brought by elected officials such as yourself or even the governor. It's somebody who's appointed, there's no accountability, there's no way to remove that person. That's an easy solution anyways. And we're just all forced to live by it.
So, you know, it's funny. Not funny, haha. You bring up, that's a classic example, and I don't mean to pick on the building inspectors, but how many years and you hear that a building codes person varies from county to county, and there's a problem with enforcement or interpretation. So that's basically what I think we're hearing here too. One area might have a certain set of rules or basic rules, but they're a little more flexible than another area that's a little more hard-nosed, and that's the problem. Okay, thank you.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Man, oh man, first off, please forgive me, but I am like a movie television person, and sir, you remind me of Kevin James. I'm like, okay, keep it together, Stephanie, this is serious. But again, we thank you all for coming here because this is how we get better. We have to hear personal testimonies. I know that, like my good chair, he will start committee with headlines from newspapers. He's very learned, very knowledgeable. And I was reading this one article. It came earlier this month, CBS News, reporting on on Michigan. According to physicians and infectious disease experts in Michigan, much of the rise in pediatric cases is linked to the reopening of schools and youth sports. It says that state data shows that more than 40% of new outbreaks have come from either K-12 schools or youth sports. And so, I'm just guessing that's where some of these rules and things are coming from, because people are trying to keep people healthy. And this is what I do understand. I understand that young people will bounce back quicker than I probably would. And so folks are thinking as they're coming up with this, not only are they interacting with their teammates, but they're going to be interacting with the coaches and the referees. I was reading an article about a referee, 62. They said he wore 3 masks, he had a face shield, he did all of this. He still ended up catching COVID and not surviving. And I know it's tough. It's tough. And I'll just share a quick testimony. Because I'm a mom, I had a senior at high school. He had an opportunity to play youth sports, so I'm one of those parents. I know all about it, all our Saturday games and all of that stuff. And I can't imagine what he would have felt had he not been able to go to the state championship, because they did. He was able to go. But then on the other hand, I had another son. He was a senior in college, though, last year, an animation student who had been working for a full year on a movie that they were going to present. And the whole family is excited about going to the university and seeing this finished product after 4 years of all of our tuition money. And it didn't happen because of COVID, not because of anything or anybody, but because of this horrible disease. And I don't know, I'm saying that I get it. I absolutely understand. I'm not somebody sitting here looking down going, I don't know what they thought. I absolutely get it. But my last question is, well, I have a question for you, because I'm always solution-driven. Just like with my friend Tyler, I'm writing him a letter of recommendation. We can't stop certain things. Specifically, what is your ask? Is it just to let you do what you want to do with your kids, regardless of how it might impact others around you? I want to be clear what the ask is.
So specifically, it would be initially to at least follow the current MDHH guidelines of testing for 13 to 19-year-olds and not be forcing it on my 12-year-old. Second, I would think that there should be some flexibility within those guidelines when you have extenuating circumstances. Do you have anything to add?
I think using a test that's not designed to be used in non-symptomatic people is very troublesome as well. And the singling out of student athletes versus anybody in the general public seems very counterproductive and very discouraging to those athletes to keep them away from their athletics. Because if my student goes to school, they can go to school every single day and not have all of these issues with these unknown tests and that aren't even approved to be used in the manner in which they're being used. But the moment they decide to be a student athlete and take on more responsibility and try to better themselves right out of the gate, it's these new rules and there's no flexibility. I mean, I guess my ask for any parent out there is, if this was after weeks of medication of your child, would you even consider sticking something very similar up your child's nose? And I would hope that answer would be no, but now we're depriving her of those choices. So.
And can I also add, sorry, you mentioned about the 40% of outbreaks within schools. When you consider an outbreak is 2 cases, so how many of those buildings had 2 cases of COVID? So is it really that substantial? There's no way of knowing unless you actually pull the data. As we are able to spin statistics and data to fit whatever needs we are looking to get it to fit. And I think that often happens with statistics coming out of government agencies in general, that this is the agenda we are pushing, these are the statistics we have, how can we make these stats fit what we're trying to achieve? So that would be my response.
Okay, very good. So my committee members know me, I'm always solution-driven.
Yes, yes.
So one of the things that came up, and Dad just showed that picture, and you said you had difficulties finding a test that your daughter would be able to use that wouldn't cause a reaction?
Yeah, so there is a saliva test available.
Okay.
And the school was okay with doing that, but you can't find them anywhere. And it was going to be my responsibility to drive her somewhere to go take it, and I would have to fund it to meet their requirements.
Okay, all right. So I'm thinking, let me do some research on these alternative tests for children or any others that may have these negative reactions to the standardized test that we're currently using.
Personally wondered why we can't be using the spit test or saliva test in general. I don't know if there's a cost issue or what, but at least that would curb the sticking stuff up the noses that people are concerned with. So,
well, I know for sure we want to use the test that's going to give us the best result. I get that. But when we run into situations like this, we don't want to endanger our children to reaction. So I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Young. And I encourage you to do some research, because if that's true, if that does work, I think our first testifier, that was also the issue as well. So maybe there's a solution there. So let me know what you come up with. All right, Rep. Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very empathetic to your situation there, and everyone else that's spoken. One of my phrases that I use in government actions is sometimes ambition exceeds ability. And this might be one of those instances where government has tried to intercede and they're exceeding their ability to properly do it. But a comment you made was interesting. You said that you thought the activities of DHHS were asinine. My contention would be the balls are still up in the air as to what's going to be proper. But if you're told that you're following all the data and all the scientific information, would you still consider asinine a proper word?
If all of the proper scientific data is actually presented and evaluated and taken into account when coming up with these guidelines, then I might be willing to reevaluate my statement. However, I don't feel that that is necessarily the case, and I feel that our MDHHS tends to go with what they want and not reevaluate based off of current science. We claim that that's what we're basing everything off of, is science, 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 and yet very little is actually produced visually for Michigan residents from the state. And it appears that our MDHHS guidelines don't always align with what the federal government and CDC sometimes recommend. And it's making it challenging.
Great clarification, and I think you'll find that there's a lot of people up here that agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have to end in 15 minutes. We got 2 more people that want to testify. So Rep. Riley, I know you've got a question, but can we hold off on that? All right. Thank you. Thank you for testifying.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Next up, I'd like to call up Harris Meekoff. Harris around? Yes. If you come on up, introduce yourself, and tell us why you're here this morning, that would be great. Make sure that mic is turned on.
Thank you for taking your time to invite me here. My name is Harris Meekoff. I'm a freshman at Allendale High School. I've been wrestling since I was 4 years old. It is my favorite sport. Last fall, I gave up football to focus on wrestling. I started to practice 4 to 5 days a week. Beginning in August, I traveled to 9 tournaments: Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, South Carolina. I wrestled in 51 matches in preparation for my first wrestling season at Allendale High School as a freshman. Whenever I had hard practices or matches, I told myself all this hard work was for the state tournament. High school wrestling finally started in February, and all my hard work paid off. My record was 32-7. Our team got to go to state, where we made it to the semifinals. I took second in individual district and regionals. I lost to the same wrestler by 2 points, then 1 point. He eventually took third at state. 3 hours before I weigh in for individual state tournament, my coaches told me, and another one of my teammates, Chris Perez, that we could not wrestle at the state tournament. He said that we were contact traced and the wrestlers we wrestled at team state semifinals. Even though we had just tested negative, our coaches told us there was nothing we could do. We both tested negative 2 days prior when we wrestled that team. 2 days later, we tested negative and they tested positive. This made no sense to me. I did not know what to do, so I went home and worked out. The next day, I watched the tournament online. I was projected to take 7th by Michigan Grappler. Everything I worked for it was taken from me. My goal of being Allendale's first 4-time state placer was gone. The wrestlers that Chris and I were contact traced to also wrestled Lowell at the team state finals. Lowell's wrestlers wrestled in individual states, while Chris and I watched. I tested 5 times over the course of 10 days. Every single one of those tests were negative. I told I was not wrestled. My teammates Chris Perez and Andrew Hollenbeck were both seniors. They will never get another chance. At least I have 3 more years, but I want to make sure that no other wrestler has to experience what me and my teammates had to this year.
Thank you. You start to wonder what the point of the test is. If you keep testing negative and yet they don't change anything, what is the point of the test? Anyone have any questions? Rep Young.
I tell you, the more I listen, so this is what I'm trying to understand, because I actually got one of those calls like a month or so ago about this contact tracing. It was like, oh, my niece, Auntie, I just need you to know that I was around somebody who said they were around somebody who tested positive. So I was like, really? Okay. And then, of course, then she calls back and said, wrong, it was a wrong diagnosis. But, you know, you get it, so you're thinking, no, I got to be still, I got to do all of this. But my question, it's not even a question. I'm trying to understand contact tracing, and you guys aren't the experts on this. And the reason that I'm getting concerned, because I'm hearing that right before the big qualifying match, right before the final, somebody says, you've been contact traced. And I just want to be certain people playing fair. And where's the evidence that somebody actually had something, right? So I don't know. I'm just saying, y'all, this is starting to concern me, because I would hate for somebody like you to be on your way and then an opponent makes a call and says, so-and-so was positive and you were around so-and-so, and now you get pulled out and now they may have an opportunity. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it is something that I want to look into a little bit more about understanding what's the proof that whoever says they had it, that we have proof that they actually did have it. I'm sorry, everybody nodding their heads. I'm hearing you, because I'm a mom too, so I get it. But at the same time, I believe in erring on the side of caution, and I don't want anybody else getting sick. I'm from Detroit. We have lost so many people. And many people have, but just so many, my own family member, friends have died from this virus. So anyway, we can prevent additional deaths, I'm all for, but I'm also for equity. and making certain that things are being done decently and in order. So thank you guys for your testimony.
Yeah, I think that is important about the contact tracing is you don't know who it is. I know you said you thought you were going to get 7th place. You wonder maybe it was the 8th place guy that did that. You know, I mean, you start to wonder of how do they prove that it wasn't just a false report. And maybe we need some better, I don't know, something to actually make sure we know where these are coming from. Representative Riley.
Yeah, just I want to have a question, but first just a comment on my fellow representative's comment just there about our health. I think we have to look at the total health of the person, the mental health included, which obviously is affecting every one of these athletes from their stories and emotions that we see. My question, or my point I wanted to make last time, which is kind of came off of my fellow representatives about rules and asked what rules and what's the responsibility of the government to come up with rules. I guess my question would be, do we need to necessarily have rules at the state level, or would it, if we had a choice, would it not be better to have recommendations from the state with local municipalities or school districts determining what their rules are going to be? Would you suggest that over the state intervening in all these issues?
Yeah, I would. Like, it kind of depends on the school as well. If your school says, yeah, go ahead, because I know you're safe. I know. I haven't been contacted. I stayed home. I was online the entire time. I had one match with a kid. So that's kind of my...
Yeah, it's the principle of subsidiarity. The closer home you are, the more often the better decisions are made. So thank you.
If I may on that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Doug Meekoff, Harris's dad. So to that point, Lowell, who wrestled the same team we did after wrestling the state finals, they took that position. From what I understand, they hired an attorney right away and said, what's going to happen if we let our kids wrestle? And the attorney advised them nothing's going to happen. So Lowell's kids wrestle. And I don't know if anything is going to happen. And that's where you're trying to explain to him, why can't I wrestle? And the kid that he wrestled, he's wrestling after. How come he's wrestling? So,
great point. Thank you.
Rep. LeGrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Riley, I enjoy our exchanges. I just want to point out that all the arguments you made there for COVID, you could equally apply to speed limits. We can just let people make their own decisions on how fast they feel like going and how fast they feel is appropriate and make their own decisions. I mean, I think we probably have a fundamental disagreement on the value of expertise. I can make there's a reason that we have experts, and there is a reason we collect data. And if I feel in my heart that COVID's not real, that's not really the best response to what's a pandemic. And back to this question of people not being made to be alone. At the end of the day, we are interdependent, and if we have a collective problem like a pandemic, I'm pretty clear that that's exactly the point where we have to make collective decisions. And frankly, as far as contact tracing goes, one of our difficulties here, I think, is probably too much default to privacy. I know that we have HIPAA concerns that, my gosh, heaven forbid anybody know that I got sick. Well, I think that's an important, really important part of our collective decision-making is knowing who got sick. And if privacy gets in the way of us being able to make collective decisions about life or death matters, I think that's inherently problematic and, another thing we need to discuss. Anyway, thanks.
I'd love to respond to those comments, but we need to get to the next testifier. So thank you, Harris, for being here. Next up, Andrew Hollenbeck. Is Andrew here? Yes. Come on up, please. Introduce yourself, and thank you for being here.
Well, good morning to all of you. My name is Andrew Hollenbeck. I was a senior at Allendale High School. I am now graduated, and I am planning on futuring my career in the Marine Corps. So first, I'd like to thank Representative Meerman for allowing me to come today. And my senior year was taken from me. I was contact traced, much like everybody else. I'm also a fellow wrestler. I was on a team with Harris, and I know Tyler Jansen very well. He's a close family friend. I was contact traced the day before our regional meet that our team went on to go qualify for state. I was forced to go to quarantine for 14 days, and it ended my season because I was ending my schooling as soon as the wrestling season was over. So I was in class, and maintaining my eligibility to continue to wrestle. It left me with a bittersweet feeling. I was just another kid affected by this, and I didn't know what to do. I alienated myself from other classmates to not get contact traced throughout the season out of fears of being contact traced. And I slowly lost motivation for school, being in that situation all the time. Just hearing the words, wear your masks, distance from each other at lunchtime, don't talk to your peers, make sure you're just around each other for 15 minutes and go move, talk to a different group. And I ask just why? Why is the government and the health departments allowed to take away from my high school experience? Why can't adults make decisions for their children, for their health? What is the purpose of wearing a mask in close contact if I'm still going to get contact traced, which I know was touched on? And those are just some of the few and of the many questions I have. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Any questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for testifying. I know we kind of covered this issue. A lot of people here. I think it's something we have to keep looking into. You know, it's easy in the Lansing bubble sometimes to think about our own lives and forget about the people that are going through school. And right now, these are their formative years. And this pandemic and the response to it has really caused a lot of issues. And we need to make sure that we're thinking of them. Rep Young. No, please. I'd like to hear your comments. Go ahead.
I just want to kind of close the loop on the story about my son, because you guys are all so young, and your whole life is ahead of you. We're not going to be in a pandemic forever. So right now it's tough. I get that. And my son missed out on his whole senior experience, the movie, all of that kind of stuff. He had no idea. He kind of shut down just like most young people do, even though he's in college, but he's still young. He confessed to being a kid. And so we didn't know. We missed all the pomp and circumstance. There was no graduation. And in Detroit, many of you might not know, but the statistics for an African-American male of my son was supposed to either have been shot and killed or in prison instead of graduating from college. So we were excited that he beat the statistics, and we missed out on all of it. But this is what I wanted to leave you. We kept just like you are, we kept checking in on him, like your parents are here with you. So you got love all around you. And because he's an animator, we thought he had to go to California or Florida to find a job. Who can find a job during the pandemic in something like animation, right? But just so happens, he's an animator with a full-time job here in Lansing, of all places, and just moved out of my house last weekend and has his own apartment, and he's doing the job he loves. And so I just want to encourage you that it's going to be all right. You know, wherever you're going to go to school, it's going to be okay. We're going to look back on this horrible time. And I'm glad that you guys are fighting and not being silent, because that is what our democracy is all about. It's about letting your voice be heard. So congratulations, young man, and please be encouraged.
Thank you. I just have one question then. Who's to say this won't become an epidemic where it's seasonal? A virus is always changing, we know that. So why would we continue to live like this if it can potentially become yearly?
That's a good question. All right, we do have to get moving on here. So thanks for everyone who testified today. We did vote on that subpoena first thing in committee. I don't know if you guys saw the breaking news. Former Director Gordon has agreed that he will come testify now next week. So encourage you guys to be prepared for this. This is not a moment for grandstanding and saying your own statements. This is not a moment for political gotcha questions. This is a moment to try to find answers. And so I expect the committee members, I know you guys have done a good job in the past, but think about the things that you would like to know regarding these agreements, regarding the termination, and the questions you would like to ask. I don't want to turn this into some political stage that everyone's just trying to score political points. The point of oversight is to get answers. And to get proper answers, you got to ask good questions. You've got a week to think about this, and I expect you guys to bring your A game next week. This is a rare opportunity, and one I want to make sure that we do the people of Michigan a favor. Rep. LeGrand.
I agree, Chair. I certainly will say that my concern has been that we run this in a respectful manner and that we focus our questions on things that are germane to the people, and that this not become diversion into, you know, did the governor yell, what decibel were voices at? Did someone call you a mean name? I mean, I think the relevant question, if we can stick, I really hope that we can all stick to the relevant questions, which are, is there something that people need to know, and not, is this something that we can make a nice tabloid journalism story out of?
Thank you. Yes, Rep. Rixey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will that be the only item on the agenda next week, then?
Absolutely. I'm not going to, we're going to make sure we have all the time in the world for Director Gordon, yes. All right. Thank you guys very much. Seeing no further business before the House Oversight Committee, we are adjourned.